Others create mirrors, holding it to the world, to audiences, and oftentimes themselves. From the beginning of her career, she has done exactly that. Her work is not just about storytelling, it's about self exploration, asking difficult questions, and taking up space where oftentimes there wasn't any. Now, with Self, an animated short film streaming on Disney Plus, Sahadi invites audiences into a world that feels deeply personal and universally human. This film is a meditation on identity, transformation, and embracing ourselves, the parts we fear and the parts that we evolve into. But behind the story is a filmmaker whose own journey is just as complex as it is transformative. Please welcome the visionary writer and director behind Self, Sahadi Huluf.
Hi, thank you for inviting me over.
Every storyteller has an origin story. You were raised by a single mother in LA by way of Fresno. You carry your Ethiopian Habesha culture with you. But before the industry, before the recognition, there's always that one moment. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's life changing when a person knows that they were meant to tell stories. What was that moment for you? When did you realize that storytelling wasn't just something that you loved, but something that you had to do?
Yeah, it came very weirdly through STEM. So I was in a upward bound program, which is basically like trying to get like peoples from underrepresented like communities to get more involved in like science, engineering, um, no arts whatsoever. It was very focused on like STEM before it was STEAM. And when I was doing that program, I kind of was like weirdly in autopilot mode. I think I'm just someone who's very like hardworking and I'll do the work. And I think like at such a young age, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I knew that like I could like I'm just such a like task accomplisher. So part of this extend program was doing computer coding, which is in its own way kind of like an art form too, because you're like coding and designing websites. So I think that was my first introduction to kind of like the creative arts in a weird way. And I was so passionate about it because I just knew that like that was such a kind of like key role in this like program I'm doing because we're doing like website competitions like with everyone in the United States. So within that competition, they also had like a filmmaking competition, which is to make a film, and then something just clicked in me being like, "Oh, I should just do this." So I grabbed all the seniors and we did it. The film won no awards. It wasn't even mentioned. We submitted it, nothing happened, but it was like the experience of doing it that made me realize that like, "Oh, wait, I could do this. I wanna do this." So, like, I felt so bad for the program because they wanted, like, science and engineering math students, and I'm like, "I'm going to film school." Thanks for 4 years of all of these, like, chemistry classes and biology, but I'm gonna do arts. So, yeah.
I love that. You found what you wanted to do.
Exactly.
So much of who we are ends up in the art that we create. And Self is a short film about transformation and identity and about the versions of ourselves that we struggle to accept. Looking back, how much of you, your own fears, your own growth and self discovery ended up in this short film?
Yeah, like, it's really, the biggest thing that came from me was, like, the title. So the title of the film is Self, but, like, it's always been short for self-sabotage, and, like, I know I want to tell the story about someone who kinda just, like, becomes their own enemy in their own way, and also I really want to tell a story about one's relationship with themself, just because I think that, like, that's the most important relationship you like, need to kinda nurture and care throughout your life. And those are kind of like the thoughts and things going in me. And it's so funny because even though mine was like very specific, and when I pitched it to people, I think there's like a universal theme and echoedness from this story that people like kind of grab to. Which is like kind of like nice because I think that like mine are like so very like rooted to like black immigrant and then black women African women experiences that, like, like, there were some white males from my crew, and they're like, "Yeah, I know a feeling when I didn't belong and I didn't fit in," and, like, so, like, in this way of, like, this story is about, like, self-identity, well, one's relationship to themselves, but, as a filmmaker, I kind of learned that, like, once your film is out there, like your baby, like, it's not yours anymore, it's like everyone has their own opinion and interpretation, and, like, it's been so interesting to hear that, but the core of it is about, like, identity and, like, relationship to yourself.
When you knew that your baby was about to be released into the world, what was the doubt or the self-sabotage that might have happened for you right before you were like, "Ah, this here we go."
I know. I think I was like, conscious about how people might feel about the ending, because the ending's a little, like, opened and not really, like, a full circle kinda story, and I really like that because I feel like that's how life is, and, I think we're so used to seeing a lot of shorts or a lot of Disney shorts with, like, a happy ending, and this one didn't have one, so I hope that, like, even though it's not, like, a happy ending and, like, there's also this, like, special where it's 2 of just, like, people really love Pixar shorts, like, they really, really love it, so there's, like, this expectation of, like, "Oh, I hope I could meet the level of expectation," not only the audience, but, like, the other filmmakers who also did that. I hope I could, like, be in that kind of realm with them. And it was, like, this time last year where the film came out, so it's been nice to kinda have, like, a full year kind of reflection on it, because, yeah, like, she went on a journey this year, kinda, like, traveled the world and got to see a lot of people too. So, like, I think in the beginning, there's a lot of fear, but, like, as months went on, like, she got exposed more and more and kinda be all over the world.
And getting to a platform like Disney Plus is huge, but success doesn't always feel the way we expect sometimes. When you finally saw Self released into the world and people receiving your art and this gift, what were the emotions that you experienced?
There's definitely a feeling of, like, being proud, like, when my mom watched it, um, her interpretation was that, she thought it was like, "Oh, this is about, like, African Ethiopian women being strong," because, like, during the time when I was making the film, there was, kind of like, a civil war happening in Ethiopia, so there was, like, kind of, like, a lot of, like, women actually being mistreated during that time, and they think that, like, Self at the end of the film has, like, a lot of spoiler, scars and, like, cracks, and I think for her, it's like, "Oh, yeah, it's like Ethiopian women, like, even if they could get, like, hurt, even though they have, like, marks on their body, they'll still get up and be strong." So, like, yeah, it's, like, very interesting to hear, like, my mother's thoughts about the film because like, part of the film is about her experience about being an immigrant. Mm. But, yeah, those are kinda, like, that was, like, one of the main things that kinda, like, stuck to me when I was thinking about the film.
Mm. And getting your film into the industry, just being a Black Ethiopian woman in the industry could be brutal sometimes for underrepresented voices, and there's often a moment in your creative journey where everything could feel impossible, when success just kind of feels out of reach and you don't know where you're going. Can you share a time when you felt like giving up and what pulled you back and reminded you why you are here and why you're meant to be here?
I feel like the one that sticks to me the most was, like, the first time I ever made a short film. So, like, when I was making Self, I felt the most confident in my ability to direct and write, but I always think back at that time when I made my first film and I just didn't know. I didn't know what I didn't know. I also just, like, like, as a director, you're, like, in a leadership position, so you're communicating and giving like, making decisions, like, that's what you're primarily do, you're just constantly making decisions and being a decision maker. When I was a newbie making my first film, like, like, basically 10 years ago, I just didn't know how to make decisions, and I think that, like, I was very grateful for that experience because it was me, like, failing a lot, but in a safe environment. Um, and even though I kinda failed and even though I didn't like the film, it got to so many film festivals and it got, like, so much screen time that, like, it's kind of funny for me to be like, "God, that was, like, my worst experience because it was my first experience, but at the same time, I had the most festival run and, like, most kind of, like, experience with the audience."
Mhm. And Hollywood is changing, but not always fast enough. And as a filmmaker, you've had to navigate the industry. And again, that hasn't always made space for diverse voices or diverse stories. What's the hardest lesson you've learned about making space for yourself? And what advice would you give to someone who's trying to do the same?
I think like the biggest one is to not give up. Like our this industry is just so like hard and like almost like unforgiving. But I think that we're so used to just seeing so much success on social media that like there's this kind of like weird mind game of you're still thinking like, oh, it's easy, you know? But I think like once you actually do it, you actually see the difficulties. And me making short films for so many years, like Self had her own difficulties, but like I think it's just like I'm training my muscle to kind of get better and better at it. So like in the sense of community is really big to me. Like I really have like like a strong core of like female directors I keep in touch with just because no one's gonna know this experience like they do in a way. Um, and also like advice too, I think is really just like find spaces to make art, but having it be in a place where you could like safely fail. Cause I think like when you're in a like I knew stuff was gonna be on Disney Plus, but like if I didn't make those other 5 shitty films before Self, I think I would been like really scared and really frightful. But because of those experiences making those films and doing it at different cities and like uppy the challenges every time, like I wouldn't not know how to make Self and be a more decisive filmmaker and director for that film.
I love that as you reflect, you're not afraid of what failure could might have looked like. It brought you here.
Yeah, yeah. And I think too that like there's this sense of like I'm honestly not scared of failing, but I do think I have a little bit of that fear of like people knowing I failed, which I think is like 2 different things. I think like when I'm privately alone at home working on something, then I'm like, well, that didn't work out. But like I think for me it doesn't discourage me. And I'm feeling that right now too as I'm like writing my next thing. I'm like really motivated by this idea and I'm like, "Ooh, this feels so good." And like even like I would wake up the next day and be like, "Oh, the pages I wrote does not make sense. I need to rewrite it." But like I feel really energized. But the moment I share it with someone, I get the feedback. There's like a bit of like, "Oh my god, I'm like dumb." I'm like, "I can't do that." Like so I think there's like a sense of like me having to like coach correct my thinking a lot of like and again, I keep going back to, like, failing safe spaces because I think all artists are very sensitive, and I think you do need to find a space to, like, fail, but being with the right people give you that harsh feedback, but also will help you pick yourself back up to keep going.
I love that. I love hearing that. You have made it to the premier animation studio in the world, Pixar. And in order to do that, as I've also had to do, navigate what face you have to put on. And it seems like the main character in the end, when she saw her face, she made a really daring decision to choose herself. And sometimes, Searit, I wonder, it's not until we have to be in their world or work with them or do what we have to do in their society. And again, we're putting that mask back on, but why do we choose to put the mask on in the first place? Is it, why are we not choosing ourselves unapologetically?
Yeah. It's so interesting because there's, like, a viral clip going on right now with, like, Trevor Noah talking about, like, and oh my god, integration. Um, and him like, kinda talking about, like, you know, like, did America need integration? Like, but let's take out the oppressing, people not getting jobs, all the negative stuff. Like, we take out all the negative stuff. Like, do we need it? And like that made me think a lot about too about just like, do we want to get invited to this? Like, why do we feel like we need to? Like, is there like a sense of like we need to prove ourselves to other people, but at the same time, we're being told and fed that we had to be by society. Um, and like it's kind of it's it's also just, like, a very specific thing about immigrants too, like, there's a reason why, like, a lot of immigrant people stick together in groups because I think there is this, like, kinda idea of, like, we have each other's back. There's no forced integration in that weird way too when you know someone who's from your culture, but there is in this sense, like, I just think about America specifically and being an immigrant, like, there's especially right now, like, there's so many things that, like, you're kind of forced to do to be integrated, but at the same time, like, that if it wasn't such a negative thing to be immigrant, like, would you want to? So it's kind of like a big topic, heavy, deeping kind of question or like thought process I've been thinking about, especially since I like listened to that episode of Trevor Noah. So, yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with just like you don't want to be alone. You want to have a sense of community. At the same time, like you don't realize it in the moment that you're like losing yourself to be like everyone else. That's it worth it. And that's kind of like what that like this very short 6 minute film is trying to talk about. Cause like I think like at the end of the day, like no one wants to be alone. No one wants to not like have that sense of community or anything like that. But I think also there is that consequence of like losing yourself. And then like even with her with having her choose herself again, picking up that mask, like there'll still be cracks there to remind her like what she did before. So it's this weird thing of, like, when I talk about, like it's not really a happy ending film where it's just, like, there's still parts where they're still broken and she still needs to figure out, but at the same time, she kinda took her first step forward to kind of wanting to be herself.
Yeah, I think a lot about that too as a child of an immigrant. I do too. Every great storyteller has an unwritten story that they're just aching to tell. And you briefly said you're working on your next piece. What is next for you? What is the story that might scare you the most to tell, but you know that deep down it's just something that you have to do?
Yeah, right now I'm writing a feature, and I'm writing a father-daughter story because I realized that there's not a lot of father-daughter films. There's a lot of, like, mother-daughter, mother-son, and, like, father-son, but the particular relationship between a father and daughter, especially within the Black community, there's just not a lot of films that talks about that subject, so there's an urgency for me to kinda tell that story because I have a complicated relationship with my father, and I feel like, I think that a lot of people could kind of like relate to the sense of like, especially if you're like you said, like you're a child of immigrant parents, like the stories about like an immigrant African parent and like a first gen kid, like these are kind of like stories really don't hear as much, specifically in a sense of like a father and daughter. So that's something I'm really working on right now.
I'm excited to see it.
And I made a short film too, so I have a hybrid live action animated short film called Rewarded Found that's, like, started to play so, like, the film festival circuit this year.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
In that moment when the main character sees a shooting star and she wishes for the most dangerous thing of all to be someone else that she's not, and in the process, she loses herself. We see that she's broken, she feels unwelcome and out of place, and we know that that decision she made, like you said, it was out of self-sabotage. Maybe it was out of a place of pain and not really clarity, but Searit, Self is out now, and it has been so well received, and the film provided clarity in a way that only animation can do that. And if you saw a shooting star right now, what would your wish be on yourself?
That's a great question. I think of time a lot. Lately, I've been thinking a lot about time, so I've been thinking about having more free time to think and kind of learn more about myself, which gratefully I feel like I have that right now. So like I just want even more time, like selfishly just more time to just like not have to worry about anything but myself and like the things I want to work on.
Radical self-care.
Yeah.
Sahadi, your journey is a testament to perseverance and honesty. And you haven't just made a film with self, you created something so deeply personal that will resonate with audiences everywhere and Perhaps in doing so, you allowed us to look inward and see that the stories that are most important to tell are oftentimes our own. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I appreciate this. This is really, really like soulful. So thank you.